Welcome to Lincoln City Council meeting of December the 12th, 2015. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor of or opposition to the item. Please spell your name for us if it looks like it's something we might not be able to handle. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meeting of the month, which this is, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor plan for a future agenda. Call the first item, please.
All right. We would request those giving testimony to please sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 7.
Anybody would like to speak to these items? Next item, please.
All right. If not, we can vote on these items. Item 1 was introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Roy. Discussion, call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge. Motion carried 6-0. Items 2, 4, and 5 were introduced by Fellers.
So moved. Second.
Second by Roy. Discussion, staff questions, call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Next would be our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, the witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 9, application of Big Red Tacos, LLC, doing business as Fuzzy's Taco Shop for a Class C liquor license at 1442 O Street, and the related manager application of Christine Jackson. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you. Just give your name and address.
My name is Christine Jackson. My address is 612 Eastboro Lane, the 68505.
Any questions? I'll start. We're certainly glad to see you. It's okay. It was probably as much our fault as anybody, but 3 meetings in a row we thought we were going to get to see, and then you just never were here. So we thought maybe you were a figment of our imagination. So
Well, I'm really happy I was able to make it today.
we're glad you did too. Tell us a little bit of your chance to give an ad for Fuzzy Tacos.
Well, Fuzzy's Taco Shop is a taco shop with a few other benefits, such as quesadillas, enchiladas, and so on, and of course, a bar. So it's quite a fun restaurant. We have quite a few college students that come down. We support, well, of course, go Big Red. Other than that, we're just here to serve.
Okay. Questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody who'd like to speak to this item? You're good. Staff questions? Next item, please.
All right, I'll call items 10 and 11. They're the application of Copel Inc., doing business as Copel, for a Class I liquor license at 4747 Pioneers Boulevard, and the related manager application of Romulo Vega.
Anybody here who'd like to speak to this item? Come on up, please.
Please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell that the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be? Thank you. Just state your names and addresses.
Okay.
Go ahead, ma'am, you can tell us
Oh,
your.
yeah. My name is Cynthia Lopez. I'm the president of Copal Inc. The address is 4747 Pioneers Boulevard. The zip code is 6A506.
Okay. You want to tell us a little bit about what it
Yeah.
is?
Well, the restaurant, the name of the restaurant is Copal. We are planning it's a full service restaurant, Mexican restaurant. We are gonna take a little bit of more the traditional dishes to mix it with the new trends, and it's gonna be adapted to the American market. So you're gonna find like filet mignon, but in a Mexican style.
Very good. Questions? Carl?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the building where you will be located. Will you be ground floor, second floor? How much of the building? How large will you be?
Ground floor is the first floor of the building, just on the corner. The space is around 2,700 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I should ask, you both have taken the server training and,
Yes.
Yes.
okay, very well, thank you. Anybody who'd like to discuss this item? Staff questions? Next item, please.
All right, I'll call item 12, application of Parker's Smokehouse for a change of location of their existing Class IK liquor license from 6440 O Street to 8341 O Street. Hi, Mike. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Michael Reardon, appearing on behalf of the applicant. My address is 645 M Street. I'm an attorney in town, and I represent Emily and Jeff Parker. This is merely a change of location from their location out in the Gateway Mall up the street on 70th and O Street. With that, I'd attempt to answer any questions. The application meets all the requirements of the Nebraska Liquor Control Act, and again, I'd answer any questions you might have.
Question? Trent?
When are you guys open?
I want to open up shortly after the first of the year.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Mike, appreciate it. Any question, anybody who else like to speak to this item? Staff questions? Next item, please.
All right, we'll go on to our public hearing ordinance's second reading.
We
I'll
want to vote
call,
on the liquor?
I'm sorry, yes. John's gone, I got all out of prep. I would
That
take a
hurts.
motion for
That
items 8 through 12.
Oh, so, go ahead. I'll second.
Moved by Trent, seconded by Carl. Discussion?
While I'm signing things.
Call the roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Next would be our public hearing ordinance's second reading. I'll call items 13 through 17 together. They are the annexation agreement for Rokeby Road Coalition, the amendment number 4 to the Woodlands at Yankee Hill conditional annexation and zoning agreement, comp plan amendment 14004, annexation 14004, and change of zone 14017. This is all related to property generally located at South 70th and Rokeby Road.
Good afternoon. My name is Kent Seacrest. With me today is Mike Eckert from Civil Design Group. If you have any questions of our two different companies, we have worked with this group of property owners since 2006, or maybe even 2005. We are representing 14 different property owners who have 12 different tracts of real estate comprising 726 acres. I don't know if that will show up. It's a very large area ranging from 70th Street all the way out to about 96th Street, maybe not quite that far, 94th Street, on about half a mile on either side of Rokeby Road. It's just south of the new Jensen Park that you've all been working very hard on master planning along the way. Just to give you, item 13 is an annexation agreement, but it's a phased annexation agreement. to bring on the 726 acres over a period of time. The very first piece, 26 acres, is also in front of you as items 14 and 15, I believe. What we want to talk about is just quickly the history. This goes back to 2006 when this group first came together, and we identified naturally this ground with sewer, we would have to take where we have the Salt Creek sewer system, take it all the way down south, get to Hickman, and turn and bring it all the way back to open up this area. We saw an opportunity when the city was working on other sewer extensions back in 2006 that if we just simply oversized some sewer and regraded Rokeby Road, we could open up this 726 acres and not have to wait approximately 100 years for this area to develop. As you know, it's right next to Jensen Park. It's right near Highway 2 and 84th Street shopping area, so it's got a lot of neat proximity and neighborhoods around it as well. So we worked together and we figured out how to sewer it, and in 2006 we got the comprehensive plan to recognize that it would be annexed someday and developed as residential and with some red areas for commercial neighborhood centers along the way. What we then had was the Great Recession came and put this area along with lots of other areas on Lincoln on hold for about 5 years, and it was really at the start of this year that a lot of neat things started to happen. You led the way with the adoption of the new CIP for this year that allowed infrastructure, particularly water and sewer, to go into this area. So that was a very big stage. Also, the electorate and with the bond issue for a new middle school and the Jensen Park planning that you've all been involved in, that's been a big part of adding momentum to this area. Our group itself has been busy this year. We've master planned and the area into all these potential lots. Now, this probably won't be perfectly the final vision, but it was a very important exercise to figure out where we could get road circulation, where we get access to the city's arterial streets. So we did not ask for any unusual connections in the future. So we were able to meet the city's goals of keeping the arterial streets flowing and yet provide good neighborhood access along the way. We also did a watershed master plan for the whole area, showing where the 100-year waters would go, how we would do water quality, and we're also, hopefully we'll be in front of you, not this meeting, but another meeting, talking about a regional detention system. So instead of 12 different cells, we could be combining cells that would add some amenities and save real estate and infrastructure along the way. We also looked and did a master plan how to open up all this 726 acres for water, for sewer, for storm sewer along the way. So it has a lot of components. This next related item that's on the agenda, item number 15, is we're amending the comprehensive plan that we showed in 2006. We're moving some of the red neighborhood areas. We're deleting the one over here and moving them over into this region more near the 84th and Rokeby intersection areas along the way. Planning Commission recommended that unanimously to you several months ago. We've been putting it on pending, waiting to bring this whole package in front of you, showing that it's coordinated along the way. We are also on agenda 16 and 17, bringing in the actual first 26 acres, I believe, of the actual annexation. So the big agreement is a master plan phased, what all the infrastructure needed to annex the whole area, but we're going to be bringing it in as we're ready to develop, and this is the first area that is in front of you, ready to develop. I just want to thank Steve Hendrickson, Brian Wills, Marvin Kraut posthumously for his hard work in this. He helped vision this very well. Rick Pale and Tim C. It took two city attorneys to pass the baton back and forth so well to get her done. And again, Public Works, Roger Feigart, Bob Simmering, Nick McIlvain, Brian Kramer, and Ben Higgins all played a major role because it's a big area that we're talking about working. And they all work together well. I was very pleased about that. I would ask for item 13 to have a continuation of its public hearing. Your next meeting is January 5th. We'd ask that that item be continued. One of our members is deceased, and we're not quite sure of the signature block yet. And because we're corralling 14 people, and we have to have another agreement behind this agreement on how they share costs, until that gets done in the next 2 weeks, you never know. There might be an ask of an amendment later. So if you could extend that public hearing on 13 to January 5th, we sure would appreciate it. Finally, we just think it's pretty cool when you can master plan a whole area like this. It has a lot of benefits. Infrastructure is going to be built right. It's going to be built in the right place. Hopefully we don't rip it up and have to redo it. And so that's going to create efficiencies and savings for both the public and the private sector. Everybody's agreed to give the easements, the right-of-way, so we don't have to go through condemnation or anything of that nature in the future, so that will speed things up. We've had the neighbors share and talk about how they're going to connect to each other, so we have connectivity between our various 14 different property owners that we think is important. And we feel we've opened up a sweet spot that if we hadn't figured this out would have been a missed opportunity. Thank everybody, and we maybe have helped you avoid at least 12 public hearings in the future because we're bringing the annexation agreement all at the same time. And with that, Mike and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? None. I appreciate the fact that everybody sat down at the table and worked through this. It is a long process, but I think it's certainly the proof is in the pudding when you don't have, of course it also helps us not develop. You don't get very many corn stalks come in and talk about their environment there, but
That's right.
we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? These items? Jonathan?
Well, then I'll make a motion on the request to continue the public hearing. So we'd have public hearing and action on January 5th for items 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Is that correct?
Can't you, you need it on all 4 items?
Oh.
13.
Well, since they all go
that's
together,
fine.
so there's no.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Second by Trent. Discussion?
I do want to just bring up something that I noticed in the staff report. When we annex land into the city, the fire department, among other departments, gets a chance to review and provide comment. And as is the case with most annexations, we did have a note from them stating that emergency response times to this portion of the city, of course, are not at the standard desired timetable. And hopefully we're going to get them improved before any of these houses are completed. But because these areas are tied to a CIP that has placeholder funding rather than dedicated identified funding, I just wanted to point out that right now the fire and medical response times to this area are about 7 minutes from Station 6 and 12 minutes from Station 12. Those are the nearest emergency services to this location. And when I spoke with Chief Pachong, he mentioned that the police could probably get there in about 5 to 6 minutes. With some of the proposed sites in the optimization plan, that police response time would be cut probably in half, about 2 to 3 minutes, and the fire and medical response would be cut down to about 4 minutes, which is within the standard. So just something to keep in mind as we have these public discussions about emergency response and the need to support the growth of our city. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? Next item, please.
Well, I'll need to call the roll on the motion.
That's correct. Go ahead.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook, Emery,
Yes?
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Next, I'll call items 18 and 19 together. Item 18 is the cable television franchise agreement for a 15-year term with Windstream. to provide cable television services and products to the citizens of Lincoln. And item 19 is approving the conduit system lease agreement for a 10-year term with Windstream to occupy space in the city's Lincoln Technology Improvement District conduit system pursuant to the terms and conditions in the agreement.
Steve Huggenberger of City Law. I thought I would just give a brief summary for the watching audience on the cable franchise. So I'm only going to speak to item 18. This franchise agreement is relatively the same as the Time Warner franchise agreement. The vast majority of the provisions are identical, and I will try and point out what some of those provisions are. This is a 15-year non-exclusive franchise. This requires franchise fee payments of 5% of gross revenues. Windstream has agreed to finance an audit of franchise fees every 4 years up to a limit of $50,000. This franchise also has performance evaluations that can be required annually, as in the Time Warner franchise, and as we did this last year with the Time Warner franchise. The financial and insurance requirements are identical. The indemnifications to the city are identical. A letter of credit at $100,000. The customer service standards are a continuation of the federal customer service standards, which we also have in the Time Warner agreement. We require reporting slightly differently in this franchise agreement, requiring, instead of what was done in the Time Warner agreement, with annual reports, with balance sheets, and a variety of other things that are currently in the code. This also includes annual reporting for complaints and resolutions of complaints, which was one of the things that we were concerned about with the Time Warner reporting of complaints. There are requirements and obligations that include free drops to government buildings and to schools and libraries. The PEG requirements are slightly different. There's an obligation for 4 PEG channels, 2 government channels, 1 education channel, 1 public access channel. There are also HD requirements for the PEG channels in this franchise. Those do not exist in the Time Warner franchise. The support for capital needs, whether it's for government and education or public access, are comparable to the access obligations in the Time Warner franchise. From the perspective of a per sub requirement, the obligation is identical. 41 cents per sub per month is the requirement for government and educational capital support. We also have a requirement of a fiber grant in this franchise. The fiber grant in this franchise is structured so that it's $40,000 per year for the first 10 years. If Windstream has 20,000 subs or more, that obligation goes to $50,000 a year. In addition, this franchise doesn't require, it's part of the franchise proposal. Windstream will sign a conduit lease with the city, which is your item 19, which David Young will talk about after I finish talking about this. The system design on this franchise, or on this system, is that we'll have 140 minimum channels. They will be all digital from day one. The technical standards, the FCC standards, are identical to what's in the Time Warner franchise agreement. This particular franchise is different significantly from the Time Warner franchise agreement in this basic way. The Time Warner franchise agreement required service to the entire city from day one. This franchise requires that the provision of service grow throughout the time period over the 15-year franchise, with the goal of meeting at least 80% of the city by year 15. There are, I believe, the initial coverage area is between 45 and 50% of the city to begin with. We do have annual reporting requirements to indicate where Windstream is at annually in meeting that 80% or exceeding that 80%, and what technologies they're using to get there. As in the Time Warner franchise, we have the ability to override for local emergency alerts. If there are breaches of any material provision of the franchise, the city has the option of terminating the franchise. If there is an abandonment of provision of service to cable television customers, there is a penalty of $500,000. There are transfer options allowed the company, which are identical to Time Warner. Yeah, they can transfer the system to an affiliate without the requirement of the approval of the city. To any other entity requires the approval of the city before that transfer can be made. And finally, I would say Windstream, as virtually every provider, is reserving the right to pass on cost to customers as they see fit. If you have any questions, I can answer questions.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Anybody who'd like to speak? David, you want to speak to the next one? Yeah, then we'll run them both together.
Councilors, David Young, Public Works. Item 19 is a conduit system lease, which is exactly the same as our previous models. It is for 5,000 feet initially and in 500 foot increments after that at the same $3.96 per foot per year. This is the same as the Unite Private Networks agreement, and it is also the same as item 20 today. Questions?
Questions? David, just for those of us that are technologically challenged.
Me too.
Do you want to explain that kind of what that means so that it doesn't sound a lot like mumbo jumbo?
So in 2012, we started the conduit system downtown with Fast Forward funds, and we put in empty pipe. In the last 18 months, since the completion of that project, we've been building an infrastructure and lease agreements to support that. Right. Today, items 19, 20, and 21 represent the third, fourth, and fifth lease agreement of that system. Windstream and in item 20, CenturyLink, are leasing 1.25 inch space in our conduit system for pulling fiber optic cables. We are leveraging existing pipe and pipe that was installed. We have 300 miles plus of pipe around the city, and we are making that available to telecommunication providers so they can lower the cost of constructing new fiber optic based networks around the city. Our goal is to create competition in the broadband infrastructure market, and we're doing that by providing this as a service to all of the customers, and we treat everybody equally.
Very good, thank you. All right.
Could you also share with us how this will benefit businesses downtown?
In general, the most expensive cost of providing service to a business is the construction of the network. Once you have your switch in the building and your fiber in the building, the cost to provide service or turn it up and down is very minimal. Under the old model, each individual carrier would take on the full construction cost, cutting the street, boring the street, traffic control, engineering, of putting their own pipe in the right-of-way. When we did the street resurfacing project in 2012, we said, there's a better way. Let's put in one pipe and make it available to everybody for the same price. And so for a carrier to come in and construct their own network, 90 to 120 days minimum to engineer and build. Now, 2 weeks. Once you sign an agreement, pull the fiber through the pipe, you're down the road. Saves money for the carrier. Those savings are then passed on to the consumer. Costs them less to build the service.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Anybody who'd like to speak to these items, come right on up, sir.
Good evening. My name is Don Costello. I live at 2441 Bradfield Drive in Lincoln. Lived there for 40 years. I'm a 50-year resident of Lincoln. I'm a retired member of the faculty at the University of Nebraska. I'm currently an associate professor emeritus of that institution. I still teach computer science and engineering and have helped found the department there many years ago. I'm not speaking, of course, representing the university in any manner, shape, or form. I'm speaking against the contract with Windstream. I'm also president of Costello & Associates, It's an international management consulting firm that has been in business in Lincoln for over 35 years. We have consulted with over 150 firms and organizations throughout the world, including the World Bank, UN, State of Nebraska, the city and county here, Lincoln and Lancaster. And in that activity, I've had enormous exposure to different people who are involved in new technology. So I'm here as a reasonably intelligent technocrat, not a lawyer, who has been involved in advanced technology for over 50 years. I'm here as written a large number of technologically based contracts with lawyers reviewing it and improving them, of course. I tell you this so you know that I'm not a blue sky researcher, but one whose work insists that the rubber hit the pavement as well as stays on the road. I'm here to tell you what you already know, and that is no one, and I do mean no one, knows what the future of the various elements of the TV delivery system will be like over the next 15 years. You just can't know that. It's moving so fast in every one of the dimensions, you can't talk about 15 years. I've asked to see the proposed contract, but has not yet been sent to me, so I speak in some ignorance. You know that there are many stakeholders involved in the contract which you are considering with Windstream beside the city and Windstream. And I'm sure much of this has been discussed in your own conference talks and issues about the contract. The future of TV delivery system at least involves the internet, new protocols for communications, the economic survivors of the technological change revolution that is in process, and other factors that I'm sure your tech people and theirs and the various lawyers have considered. But it's impossible to look out for all the stakeholders when you consider it as a 15-year contract. That's not a hypothesis, that's a fact. On the other hand, I give you a hypothesis. Neither the city nor possibly Windstream are ready with the penalty clauses and litigation and costs of such litigation when either one or the other parties object to a supposed clause violation in even a more complete written contract than you have today. You just can't cope with all the changes and the kinds of contract violations that will result. Of course, you can negotiate. A shorter version of this hypothesis is we cannot sign a 15-year contract. I'm neither a lawyer, as I told you, nor one giving advice of a professional nature. I asked and expect to be held harmless for these statements as I only represent them as hypotheses. I'm a citizen asking that the city postpone approval of this contract until each member of the city council is able to say, without hesitation, I see the future of TV delivery systems that the citizens of the city and county will be using, and I see how my vote has protected them from unnecessary pain in poor TV service choices and in avoidance of unnecessary litigation expenses. The important point there is choice. With the variety of new technology that's happening, the choices are expanding, to use an overused word, exponentially. And as those choices expand, you can't cover them in a 15-year contract. So I ask that this contract not be approved, and I stand ready to answer any questions anybody has.
Questions, Carl?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Costello, for being here and for sharing some of your expertise. So, help me understand. So, you're saying 15 years is too long of a time, given the significant changes in the technology that we're experiencing now?
I'm suggesting that as a hypothesis. I think when you do the contract modeling of this kind of a system and this kind of thing, I'd suggest that that's what we would want, the citizen would want less than 15 years. On the other hand, Windstream, with its cash flow and its financial projections, probably wants that 15 years. That's just a hypothesis. I'm not sure of that. I'd have to see the modeling. But at any rate, the point, what you say is true. I think 15 years is just too long. You can't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Costello. Anybody who'd like to speak to this item, step right up. If you want to speak to this, would you please come down front so we know who's speaking to this, please?
Hi, I'm Brian Brooks.
Thank you.
I'm with Windstream. So I want to kind of give you guys, we talked about the franchise. I kind of want to talk briefly about the product and the technology and answer any questions that you guys might have about that. Windstream is extremely excited about the opportunity that's presented in Lincoln. We think that we can deliver a world-class TV product that provides the products, features, and service that customers want. And most importantly, provides them an option and something that they haven't had here in the local market. Our product is called Kinetic, and that product comes standard with whole home DVR service as well as HD service, things that customers want today. And we're excited about the opportunity that we can bring those to everybody. A couple of other features that we'll have is wireless set-top boxes, so you don't have to worry about where you set the product up in your home. You can actually put it wherever you want, so you don't have to have wired-in boxes there today, as well as the ability to watch content on other types of devices like smartphones and tablets. Pricing is going to be extremely competitive, and I think that what you'll find is as they bundle more services, customers will see a real value there, as well as the opportunity to get the content and the packages they want. We'll have ordering capability at our retail location today, which is at 1440 M Street, as well as a dedicated team of folks that will actually take phone calls and order. Our hope is that if we can get through the entire process, that we'll be able to launch second quarter. And so we're really excited about the opportunity that's presented to you guys, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Questions? Carl?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Brooks, for being here. You're, as I understand it, 40, 45, 50%, something like that of the city's currently covered. Could you explain the technology about how that works and how you determine who would receive service and who couldn't?
So on day one, we'll be able to serve over 50,000 households. And so our product's IPTV, and IPTV is based a little bit differently than a cable distribution system. That is based on distance from a video aggregation point in our network to the home, and that derives how much bandwidth can go into the home. Once you figure out that bandwidth, it depends on whether you're eligible or not. And so, unfortunately, we'll not be able to address 100% of the city on day one. But over time, as we invest more and as the technology increases and more bandwidth's available on that technology, we'll be able to address the remaining portions of the network.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Just talk about the timeline here.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a certain set of customers here that can get the service on day one. Day one, though, for them is what? What's the timeline for the actual rollout? What will customers see?
Okay, so day one will probably be sometime in second quarter. That's still a little bit TBD. Franchise agreement, also getting systems and things up. So day one would be sometime in, call it April or May, early June of this year. On that day, over 50,000 households that day can actually add Kinetic television service from Windstream. And then over time, as technology changes increase, as market dynamics increase, and as further investment increases, we'll be able to expand that beyond what the capability that we have today.
And customers will be able to find out if they can get the service how.
Early second quarter, we'll have a qualification tool on windstream.com, so they'll be able to go in and put their home address into that tool, and it'll come back and tell them whether they're eligible or not and what packages are available for them.
And just follow up on this, who does it? This isn't about cherry picking customers.
Absolutely
If
not.
you could, you'd do the whole city at once.
Absolutely.
So this is a technological limitation issue initially.
Absolutely.
And it's where people are located has nothing to do with what the neighborhoods are or anything else. It's solely based on where you happen to have fast enough connections.
We've built a video network over the top of our existing broadband infrastructure, and the distance from that particular point to a home doesn't change. Those same distances that are there today are the same distances before. So if you look at our coverage area, the coverage for places that have really high socioeconomics, their coverage is virtually the same as those with lower. We cover every census block. We have service available in every census block and census tract within Lincoln, as well as all defined neighborhoods within Lincoln. It doesn't mean everybody's eligible, but we do have service in all of those areas.
And the service, you'll provide packages basically similar to what you get with the cable company.
Absolutely.
In that you'll provide telephone, which you are a telephone
Yes.
company.
Yes, we
You'll
will.
provide cable TV service, and you'll provide internet service, all as a package.
Absolutely. Customers have the ability to order TV service standalone. They'll also, as they bundle additional services, whether it's high-speed internet or phone service or all three, more discounts will be available and better pricing will be available. But all three will be available as standalone products.
Okay. Up until now, since you haven't been able to provide TV service through your landline wires, you've offered package deals with Dish Network.
Correct.
Just talk a minute about your Dish customers and what their options are.
So Dish customers will have there'll be no impact to them. That relationship has been a great relationship with us. It's been able for us to be able to provide TV service without having that available. Those customers will be eligible, so long as they're not in a contract with Dish, to take Kinetic service from Windstream. Once they're out of contract, they can take service from us. Their service will not change. The same service they've gotten today from Dish, the same billing, everything will remain exactly the same.
And Lincoln is your first market for the
Lincoln will
Kinetic
be
service.
the first market, correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
I did want to take one moment and thank Steven Hackenberger and David Young for their help through the franchise process. They've been very helpful for us, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to speak to this item?
Good evening. Chairman, Embry, members of the City Council, my name is Bill Austin. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Baylor, Evnan, Curtis, Grimmett, and Witt, 1248 O Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm here representing Time Warner Cable, which presently holds the only franchise for the provision of cable television service in the Lincoln franchise area. I would at the outset ask if I might have 2, maybe additional minutes to speak. Otherwise, I'm going to have to talk really fast. And I promise I'm the only one that's going to speak on behalf of Time Warner, unless you ask questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Even though part of me says billable hours, you know. You got it.
Thank you. I could begin by telling how Time Warner Cable applauds the city's efforts in developing competition in this area, how it looks forward to competing with Windstream, but I'm going to spare you that. Nobody really likes to have competition for their products. However, Time Warner fully recognizes that they are a non-exclusive franchise and the city wants competition in this area. We're not here today to object to the issuance of another cable television franchise, provided that it is based on a competitively neutral term. Time Warner is both constitutionally and contractually with the city entitled to a level playing field. In 2005, the city engaged in rather tough negotiations with Time Warner. The city imposed some very expensive provisions on Time Warner as a condition of a renewal. Time Warner eventually acceded to those demands, but hopefully it will show up. As part of the final agreement, the city and Time Warner agreed that there would be a provision set forth here in section 2.6 that another cable operator would not be granted a franchise on any more favorable or less onerous conditions than were imposed on Time Warner. In fact, what this specifically section 2.6 says, and I quote, "Notwithstanding anything to the contrary, no such authorization or franchise granted to any other person, whether by the city, state, or federal government, to operate a cable system shall be on terms or conditions more favorable or less burdensome when taken as a whole than those imposed herein. Specifically, any franchise shall be subject to the same requirements pertaining to service area, contributions to the city's fiber system, and PEG access as are imposed under this agreement." Curiously, the city has chosen to negotiate a franchise with Windstream that manages to apparently violate all 3 aspects of that protective clause. I've provided a letter to the city attorney, the mayor, the chair of the Cable Television Advisory Board, outlining the concerns of Time Warner. we have received no formal response to that letter. I have copies of it, which I'd be happy to provide if you haven't seen. There's no need for me to read the letter to you, but let me hit the highlights of our primary concerns. First, Windstream is being obligated to provide a maximum of only 4 PEG channels at the present time, as opposed to a maximum of 5 as required by Time Warner's franchise. Second, Windstream is only required to maintain a public access studio. Cheat sheet. I'm sorry, I should have moved that. They're only required to maintain a public access studio 6 months after they report to the city that they have 20,000 subscribers. Until that time, Windstream's only obligation is to make a commercially reasonable effort to interconnect with the existing Time Warner public access studio. And this is only based on the actual costs of providing interconnection. It's not even an actual cost-sharing requirement. There has never been a trigger or limit on Time Warner's obligation to provide an access studio. While there certainly may be some economies of scale in the 2 potential franchisees working together on the public access studio, whether Windstream is successful with its negotiations or not should not exonerate it from meeting the requirement of providing a public access studio. If we fail in negotiations, they should be required to do what Time Warner did, which is provide its own studio. Third, regarding support for public access, Windstream is proposing to provide $4 per subscriber every 5 years. Even if it reaches 20,000 subscribers, that would amount to $80,000 for the first 5 years, and I suspect similar amounts thereafter for every other 5 years. There may be some more, but it depends on subscribership. Time Warner was and is required to provide $600,000 under the 2005 franchise. $200,000 in each of the first 5 years, $200,000 in the second 5, and $200,000 in the third. Time Warner's obligation in this regard is not based on subscribership. Fourth, the city required a $1.75 million lump sum payment from Time Warner for the support of educational and governmental access. This was reimbursed over many years through the collection of a 41-cent per month customer charge. But this was essentially a $1.75 million interest-free loan to the city. No similar requirement for such an upfront payment is being imposed on Windstream. Fifth, the city imposed on Time Warner, through the franchise, an obligation to provide up to $750,000 in completing the city's fiber loop. For Windstream, the amount required is from $100,000 to $350,000 less, depending upon Windstream's subscription level by year 10. Finally, the city's cable communication ordinance defines the franchise area as the area within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city. Time Warner's franchise requires it to continue to provide service to all areas of the city. The only limitation is that where there is a density of less than 25 homes per mile, Time Warner may ask for cost sharing from the customer requesting service. In contrast, Windstream, as I understand it, proposes to serve up to 45% of the city initially. We recognize that federal law requires you to allow a new franchisee time and opportunity to expand its system. It can't be required to serve the whole city at once. However, the proposed franchise before you would allow Windstream up to 15 years, that's the whole franchise period, to serve up to 80% of the city if commercially reasonable and if the market allows. This is contrary not only to the policy of the city as set forth in its cable communications ordinance, but it also violates Section 2.6 of the Time Warner franchise. All of the above would seem to me to be patent violations of Section 2.6 of the franchise agreement that was entered into in 2005. It's amazing to me that the city managed to violate all 3 of the specific areas, PEG support, fiber optic support, and service area, that they offered to protect Time Warner on in the franchise. Those were 3 specified because they were the ones we were most concerned with regarding competitive neutrality. I'd suggest to you that it's patently unfair to grant a franchise to a competitor with these differences when you contractually agreed to do otherwise. The city didn't have to drive such a hard bargain in 2005. If it anticipated granting additional franchises and didn't want to impose heavy burdens on potential competitors, it could have softened the terms that it required at the time. It didn't do so. It imposed these requirements and agreed that they would be imposed on any future applicant. Staff is now here suggesting to the council that the contract with Time Warner should essentially be violated. Further, as a constitutional speaker, under the First Amendment, Time Warner is entitled to equal treatment with anyone else seeking to utilize the forum. So I'd suggest to the council that from both a contractual and constitutional standpoint, Time Warner rightfully asks that the same service and support requirements that were assumed by Time Warner in 2005 now be imposed on Windstream. With those requirements, we would certainly have no objection to the franchise as it goes forward. So I thank you for your time and consideration and the additional time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Mr. Austin, how long had Time Warner been in place before that franchise agreement was reached?
Had it been in place? Oh, I think it took over the system in about 1995 or so. I'm looking to Jared.
So we're talking about a system where the franchise came in at 11 years, and so they had 11 years to build a system. Is it not then somewhat reasonable that a system starting brand new would have to have some time to build the capacity the same way that Time Warner did?
Oh, absolutely, and I wouldn't disagree. Actually, Lincoln had a franchise since 1975. The first franchisee was the phone company. They were required to divest at that time by the FCC.
Well, if you stay around long enough, it'll come back.
Apparently. The system was mature at the time, in 1984, at the time when I was involved with negotiating a franchise. It was fully up and running. It was Metro Media, I believe, at the time, and then cable. I think it's still probably the same old franchise, TV Transmission, Inc. I don't know if they've ever changed the name. But yeah, that's true. It does require time. And the federal government recognizes that. As a new franchisee comes in, there's a specific provision in Chapter 47 that says you have to allow them time. But I don't think that should be the full franchise period.
Okay.
Especially in light of the fact that we're really not talking about a new entrant. I mean, if we saw somebody coming into town with their truck with fiber in the back saying they want to run a system, it's one thing. This is the incumbent phone company.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item?
Steve Clements, 4151 South 31st Street, here in Lincoln. And I'm not sure whether I'm speaking for, against, or neutral, but I'll say it's neutral. And my comments go to not having seen a contract, making sure the city council and your attorneys have decent teeth in this contract. And I'm going to speak a little bit about Time Warner because it's illustrative of what I'm talking about. I was asked by my in-laws, quite elderly folks, to help them in a move, secure phone service and Cablevision and things of that nature. And I spoke to Cablevision, was very specific, taking notes, and was told their service, all the service that we wanted would be $95. First billing came in, it was $150. Frankly, I went back and forth with Time Warner, and I hate to see this happen. Back and forth with Time Warner over the course probably of a month and a half, where the bill went to the second month, $300, because they double billed and wouldn't recognize that they double billed. Back and forth, and there were some other instances we couldn't get relief on, $95 to $150 a month for the same service. I was basically led to be put in the position by Time Warner that I was either completely ignorant, I was a liar, or I couldn't remember. Copious notes. And where this led to is finally, after spending hours on the phone, the only redress they would give me is, oh, sure, we'll drop the bill down $10 if they will drop these channels. Wasn't appropriate in my mind. I called the city ombudsman's office and talked to the people there, and I finally got a response that the city has nothing to do with the contract with Time Warner, which I've got to confess, was very confusing to me. So I would ask any contract, and this applies to Time Warner when it renews, as well as this contract, has some teeth in it, so there, unless I'm just not understanding what the ombudsman said, so there's some redress when you run into circumstances like this. For myself, I wouldn't have cared so much. It was, I'm not on a fixed income. They were. This finally got resolved about 2 months later, only because my mother-in-law died and we had to cover everything out and take care of it. And I just think that's ridiculous. And I hope that the City Council will consider better provisions with this case.
Any questions? Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? Staff questions? Who do you need to talk to?
Well, I think we should hear from
We'd
Steve
like to-
Huggenberger.
Okay. And Mr. Huggenberg, you're entitled to a rebuttal. I apologize.
Who all am I going to rebut? I haven't visited with the first gentleman that came up here, the consultant. Much of what he says I don't disagree with, but he didn't make a suggestion on what the appropriate term should be, and I'd be very interested to know what his opinion on that is. But let me just speak to some of the things that Mr. Austin talked about. The provision that Mr. Austin was focused on in Time Warner's franchise says that the city is not to grant additional franchises on terms or conditions more favorable or less burdensome when taken as a whole than those imposed in the Time Warner franchise. When the city staff has reviewed these franchises and compared them, we have come to the conclusion that these are comparable when taken as a whole. They're not identical, but they are comparable in some respects. In other respects, there are other arguments why the provisions were not required. But if we just look at the provision that Mr. Austin talked about, Section 2.6 of the Time Warner franchise, the remedy for Time Warner is specified within that section. Time Warner is to have the benefit of the more favorable franchise if they think that is what has been granted to another provider. And if Time Warner wants to have the benefit of that more favorable franchise, come and talk to us and we will see what we can do. We don't think it's more favorable. We don't think they want it. But if they do, we're willing to have that conversation. A third reason why we didn't copy the same obligations in the Windstream franchise was our reading of the FCC's March 2007 Section 21 order was that it identifies those kind of provisions as unreasonable barriers to entry for a second provider. And I can talk to the provisions specifically. On the service area question, there had always been an assumption that a second provider would be granted a certain amount of time to be able to get their system in place and to provide service within the city. The question was not, the only question was, well, how long is reasonable? What we did was we took the CenturyLink franchise in Omaha, and we saw how they approached that question with CenturyLink. And their triggers for extension were not that CenturyLink cover the entire city, but that they have a market-driven trigger for expansion. We thought that sounded reasonable, and we followed that model. And while we have established an 80% goal in this franchise, we fully expect Windstream to beat that 80% within 15 years, but time will tell. On the PEG access obligations, what we attempted to do was establish a framework whereby PEG obligations were comparable. There's a 4-channel requirement in the Windstream franchise. There's a 5-channel requirement in the Time Warner franchise. The Time Warner franchise now is currently providing 4 channels because we're not requiring the 5th channel. We have been in negotiations or informal discussions with Time Warner trying to find a way to do away with that 5th channel requirement. But there is currently no programming on that channel, and I believe they are not providing that channel. The capital support requirements for government education were the same 41 cents per month, at least from a subscriber context. Time Warner is correct that they made an upfront payment of $1.75 million, and then they deducted from that amount over their 15-year franchise. They are correct, that was an interest-free loan. We were trying to compare the company that has 80,000 subscribers from day one and what their obligation should be regarding public access. We needed to have a renovation of the public access studio at that time, as well as the government access studio. And I should focus on the government access studio. And that is the reason that we asked for that upfront payment. That was negotiated as part of that franchise. But when we compare the system with 80,000 subscribers to the system that has 0 subscribers from day one, we thought some kind of an adjustment had been made, so we didn't require an upfront payment from the Windstream system. As far as the capital access for public access, Mr. Austin has correctly stated Time Warner's obligation is $200,000 for every 5-year period. We have asked Time Warner, how many subscribers do you have, so that we can calculate an appropriate amount per subscriber for the Windstream system. Time Warner has refused to give us that number. So we have to guess what that number is. We have guessed that that number is 75 to 80,000 subscribers. However, in the calculation for the capital support requirement, we used $50,000 as the estimate. 50,000 subscribers into $200,000 every 5-year period is $4 per subscriber. That's what we required of Windstream. We hope to negotiate a pro rata sharing agreement between the two companies if this franchise is granted, because we do not believe it makes sense to have 2 public access studios provided by both of these providers. We think one access studio makes more sense, and we would like them to share that burden on a pro rata basis. A pro rata basis is a model that has been approved by the FCC, or at least they've spoken fondly about it. On the fiber grant component, again, we had to evaluate what was appropriate for a provider with our estimate of 75,000 to 80,000 subscribers versus one that starts out with 0 but is growing over time. Mr. Austin correctly points out Windstream is the incumbent telephone provider. They're not a new person coming into town with cable in the back of their pickup. What we required was $40,000 per year for the first 10 years and an adjustment to $50,000 if they had 20,000 subs for the last 5 years. That total over 15 years is $650,000. Time Warner provided $750,000 from day one. In the Windstream franchise, we also have an agreement to a conduit lease, which is worth $20,000 a year for 10 years. That's another $200,000. That component is not in the Time Warner franchise. This is another element of comparing the franchises as a whole and trying to determine if they're comparable. I should add one more thing. The Cable Advisory Board talked extensively to Windstream when they made their proposal to the Cable Advisory Board. Time Warner was there as well and had comments occasionally. The Cable Advisory Board voted unanimously to recommend this franchise for your approval. If you have specific questions other than that.
I know one of the concerns that the Telecommunication Cable Advisory Board had was about getting information, as you mentioned, and in particular they were interested in customer service complaints. They were told that they could only gain access to written complaints by consumers that were submitted in writing. How does this new agreement with Time Warner address that issue?
Well, there's 2 ways it addresses the issue.
Yes, Windstream.
There's 2 ways that addresses the issue. First, the reporting requirements that Time Warner is obligated under, Windstream has agreed to comply with those voluntarily. In addition to that, the annual reporting requires customer complaints and resolutions to be provided to the city on an annual basis. The city has the unilateral option of determining what the template for that reporting is, and we haven't determined what that template will be yet, and we intend to sit down with the company and try and work out something that's agreeable to both. but we have much greater access to complaint information and resolutions than we have under the Time Warner agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jonathan?
Yeah, regarding the provision that Time Warner has this option of saying they like this other agreement better. You said that it says as a whole. So does that mean Time Warner can't pick and choose? They can't say, well, we like this one provision that we think is easier for them, but the fact that they pay more in some other provision, well, we don't want that. If they want to go that route, presumably they have to, this has to be a balanced approach. How does that work?
I think there's two steps here. I think first we have to determine that we granted a franchise taken as a whole that is or more favorable to the other provider. We're not there yet. If we reach that determination, then I think Time Warner has to come forward, and they can't cherry pick the provisions. You take the whole package or you take nothing.
Okay, that's important because I know there are other provisions. I mean, there was an auditing provision that Windstream was agreeable to, where they would pay for the audit. That this issue of customer service information, they've been agreeable to providing more information, perhaps than we've been getting from Time Warner. So there are provisions here where they've agreed to provide more than we currently require of Time Warner.
Yes, there are.
Okay, thank you.
Carl?
Yes, thank you. It was suggested by Mr. Austin that there could be First Amendment issues in this agreement. Do you have any sense of that? Is that something has been brought to your attention previously?
No. I mean, other than Mr. Austin saying that, I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but we have visited, Mr. Austin and I have visited periodically over this agreement and many other issues, Time Warner and Windstream. About that.
Okay, thank you.
Trent?
The letter that we were given was dated November 10th of this year. Is there a reason why we didn't respond to them?
Didn't ask for a response.
Okay. Did they raise any of these issues at the Cable Advisory Committee?
Raise them with the Cable Advisory Board, but in their defense, they had not seen the Windstream franchise at that point.
That makes sense.
All right, thank you. Next item, please.
All right, I'll call item 20, approving a conduit system lease agreement for a 10-year term between the city and CenturyLink Communications to occupy space in the city's Lincoln Technology Improvement District.
Councilors, this is the same agreement as the Windstream agreement and the UPN agreement before it.
Questions? Thank you. Anybody who'd like to speak to this item? I think we explained it the last time. Staff questions? Next item, please.
Next would be item 21, a conduit system lease agreement for a 25-year term with the UNL Board of Regents.
Councilors, this is a slightly different agreement. First of all, this is not a lease agreement. This is a license agreement between the university and the city. I would like to speak specifically to the differences. The city licenses the space to the university on a limited segments of the conduit where space is available, where approved by the city, at the city's sole discretion. The space may be shared with other fibers, and it is limited to 1/2 inch or less cable diameter. Very specifically, we are partnering together with the university to extend the institutional network. The agreement is for 25 years. In return for this agreement, the city will be granted 4 fibers guaranteed on the university cable and an additional 8 fibers at our request. The other differences are specifically anything that is installed for the system is property of the city, all betterments of the system and extensions of the system. Furthermore, the university will pay $8,000, up to $8,000 a year to splice all of our fibers together and continue to build the institutional network.
Question, Carl?
The lawyer in me. Okay.
I'm not a lawyer.
All right. But
didn't have to say that.
But City Attorney over here. The ordinance 4 or 5 times on the front page here talks about a conduit system lease agreement. Is that what we have, or is this a licensing agreement?
This is a license agreement. The parties are licensee and the
Okay, so lease should be removed and licensing inserted in those points, is that? Mr. Hagenberger? Okay.
Is that something we can amend?
You're looking in the ordinance document itself?
Yes.
Yes, that should be changed to license agreement.
Okay.
Steve, is that something we can just amend?
I believe so.
You can change that.
Can I just non-protunct it?
I'm sorry? Teresa, what'd you say?
Or I asked him if I could non-protunct it.
City Attorney says yes.
Okay.
It doesn't,
I can make the change.
we don't vote until,
Next week.
right. I'm just saying that's something we can just put in as an amendment and not
Yeah.
have to go back and go
That's true.
backwards through this whole.
Oh, I see, right.
It's something we can bring forward. I didn't mean tonight,
I thought
but
you
something
would-
we
you
can
do
bring, something we can bring forward and we'll get it right before we vote on it, okay? Very well. Any other questions? Thank you. Anybody would like to speak to this item? Next item, please.
I'll call items 22 through 24. They are authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds with a total not to exceed the amount of $7 million for the City of Lincoln Aspen Heights redevelopment project, approving the Aspen Heights redevelopment project redevelopment agreement, and amending the fiscal year 14-15 CIP to authorize and appropriate $7 million in TIF funds for the Aspen Heights redevelopment project on property generally located between QO 17th and Antelope Valley Parkway.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, and the applicant in this case. This is a project that you saw in November when we brought you a plan amendment describing generally this project. We've now reached the conclusion of the negotiation process for a redevelopment agreement, and we bring you that agreement tonight. Several months ago, there was a 6-inch storm, rain in Lincoln. And if you saw the front page of the paper, there was the Antelope Creek at its brim, but not overflowing, and the next day back to normal. About 3 days ago, a friend of mine said, you know, I was taking in the Antelope Valley Parkway around for Arena Drive and to the basketball game, and he said it was nifty. A third goal that we had, besides transportation and flood control, which we have delivered in spades with the Antelope Valley project, was investment. So far, we've had a $50 million surety project, a $40 million wrap building, and we bring you almost a $50 million project today, $140 million in the Antelope Valley, which was 900 acres of floodplain before the city did the Antelope Valley project. This is the project's vision, what you're seeing there, and let me tell you that this is true to the Community Redevelopment Act's purpose of removing blight and substandard conditions. This is a grandfathered surface parking lot. As you can see, it does not meet design standards. It is substandard. It serves the Duteau building. In fact, that's this area here. There is parallel parking in the area, but this, by the way, will produce about 50 new angled parking stalls in this area, something that's an important commodity in the city of Lincoln. This is an empty lot and an older building, substandard. They'll come down and be replaced by the development that you saw before. This is another building that will come down, older. I think it's fair to say that even looking from the front or looking at the back, you would regard it as a blighted building, as are the overhead and unsightly lines which will be brought down in this area. and buried, and the broken cement and gutted surface parking lots will be replaced by 3 buildings and a garage. The buildings will house 632 beds, 182 units of residence. There will be 3 5-story residential buildings and 1 7-story parking garage with living on the first floor. That will provide not only all of the parking necessary for this project, but it'll also provide parking for the Duteau building, which is downtown and is currently using the parking lots that I was showing you. So that we will take care of a considerable amount of demand for parking with this project and without public expense. That's important because this is B4 zoning and there is no obligation to provide parking if you're a business in the B4 zoning area. And yet, this developer is taking care of all of their parking needs, the Duteau building parking needs, and opening up a street usage that will allow us to add 50 angled parking stalls in the area. That's, I think, a rising tide that lifts all boats. The total amount of TIF that's being generated is about $7 million, and $220,000 comes off the top for the issuance costs, the administrative fee, and the capitalized interests. But then there's a $650,000 used for city public improvements. The Aspen Company, which comes to us from Austin, Texas, and is the first time that this developer has come to us, a regional developer doing business in a number of large cities with universities. This is the first time they've come to us, and they've said it's valuable for us to have our students being able to use, and our young residents to be able to use the N Street bike path connecting to all of the recreational trails to the east and to the rail yard, the arena, and the West Haymarket to the west. Our current boundaries don't allow for that. We understand that the city, in fact, has a hole in their budget. We would be willing to have some of our TIF used for that project because it will be an amenity for us as well as for Lincoln, and there is language to that effect in this proposal. There's also $660,000 of facade improvements, utility relocation of $220,000, landscaping of $500,000, and portions of site acquisitions of $4.5 million. It was necessary to get 3 parcels, I believe it's 4 parcels under 3 owners, under control for this. And by the way, it makes the timing sensitive because the rights to do this and the need to pay for contractual obligations is dated December 31st. It makes tonight an important night since there isn't a chance to act in the normal course of conduct, and the developer would very much like to know that they had an active redevelopment agreement in place as they made those commitments to pay costs into the future. The developer's here, and we'd be happy to answer questions. This was the Urban Design Committee several times, and I think they were quite pleased with the response that they got. And it's also been to the Planning Commission and was treated unanimously there. I hope this is consistent with the expectations that we created when we came to you in November. We think that this is, as I said, a rising tide that lifts all boats. If you're a downtown, you want to build up. You don't want to be filled with surface parking lots and older substandard buildings. You want to replace blighted and substandard conditions with exactly this kind of project.
Questions? Larry?
Dave, thanks for your presentation. And I know a lot of people have weighed in on this project, and there's been a lot of back and forth, so thank the folks developing this significant investment in our community. Can you also speak to the maintenance of some of the improvements that would come from these enhancements? Who will actually take care of the maintenance of many of these improvements?
The ones that are in the right-of-way will fall to us. The ones that are on their property will be their responsibility. But to the extent we have landscaping in the city right-of-way, we would take care of the landscaping in their city's right-of-way.
Thank you.
Questions? Dave, can you speak just a little bit to why this project didn't get to us earlier then if we're up against this tonight? Because you're going to ask us to change the rules.
We are. It's a product of a 100-page legal document that undergoes changes, a shifting sense of priorities across $7 million. And those pieces of the puzzle, you can anticipate them all you want to, but as questions on one side arises, language has to arise on back and forth, and there is a ping pong match about that kind of language, and it takes time. Not the least of which is, in the end, we also take it to the mayor, and the mayor is a former lawyer of property, and he sometimes says, I would like this language to be different, and we get that at the 11th hour.
And I'm sympathetic to that, but I also am sympathetic that perceptually that's an issue for us. And I guess we hate to get put in a position, I won't speak for the rest of them, I hate to see us put in a position where we are having to do something that perhaps the public thinks is being done very quickly. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Next, anybody else like to speak to this item?
I would. Mr. Chair, members of the council, my name is Tom Houston, 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900, here today on behalf of Breckenridge Group Lincoln, LLC, which is really a subsidiary of Aspen Heights. With me today is Tony Kerp, Executive Vice President of Aspen Heights, and then also Robert Scholes, who's the Development Manager for Aspen Heights, and also Jeremy Hahn, who's the Project Architect from Humphrey & Partners. So if you stump me with questions, I have backup for me to provide some assistance. The three items on your agenda really represent 12 months of effort working with city staff over this project. I'm not going to reiterate anything that Director Landis has informed you. I think all that's accurate and appropriate. Just a couple things I wanted to highlight. On the overhead is the site plan really commencing at 18th and Q up at this intersection along the spine of 18th Street and then again along P Street. This project had the time. I suppose one of the reasons that we're somewhat delayed is because we did go back to the Urban Design Committee a third time. Went to the Urban Design Committee early in September, also in October, and then also again in November. Our original plan was to have introduction on November 24th. That slipped a week, and unfortunately, because of the holidays, the City Council meeting was canceled on December 1st. So I am asking the council to take action. It was my error to not ask the request that the redevelopment agreement.
Just as a clarification, it wasn't canceled, it was not scheduled.
Okay. Yes. It was not held. I know
that's correct.
Yes. One of the things that we did work with the Urban Design Committee about was really the orientation of the buildings. Building 1 up at this corner originally, because of the downtown design standards, was contemplated that the courtyard would open to the alleyway, because that was the requirement of the downtown design standard. Based upon the discussions we had with the Urban Design Committee, we said, no, it's more appropriate to really open the courtyard up to Q Street. Likewise, the same consideration was made with regard to Building 3 along P Street, that the downtown design standard arguably would have required the building right on the property line with the orientation towards the alleyway, but the Urban Design Committee, along with the Planning Department, said, well, really, at this location, it's more appropriate to orient the building to show the activity within the courtyards to the traffic along P Street. So that's one of the things I did want to highlight is that my client, over a 3-month period, worked with Urban Design and the Urban Development Department on the design of the project. And I think the project's a better project for those efforts. Just a couple other things I wanted to mention on the TIF uses. One of the things that you'll see in the TIF uses is a $500,000 amount for landscaping and streetscaping along the P Street corridor, understanding that the City of Lincoln's currently looking at that corridor to determine what the appropriate landscaping and streetscaping process and design intent will be. We have some language in the agreement that makes it more flexible. We have an approved landscaping plan, but we acknowledge, and the agreement acknowledges, that it's more of a placeholder until the city's in a position so that can confirm and we can modify some streetscaping within this project to make it conform to and consistent with the long-term intent of the corridor plan for P Street. If approved, my client would plan to proceed with construction this spring. the construction would probably start in April or so of 2015. My client had met with the Development Services Center several times, so that building permitting process is not starting from ground zero. There are a lot of discussions have been had about the design and the permitting process. Currently, contemplation would be for completion sometime in approximately June of 2016 with an opening in August of 2016. And I would reiterate my humble request that we have the City Council take action tonight on the redevelopment agreement itself. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
None, thank you. Anybody who'd like to speak to this item? Come right on up.
Hello, my name is Karen Griffin, Griffin. I live at 2900 South 31st Street. I'm the current president of the Great Plains Trails Network. And on behalf of the Board of Directors for the Great Plains Trails Network, I submit this testimony in support of the Aspen Development TIF funds to be used on the N Street Protected Bikeway. As most of you know, GPTN is a group of citizens who advocate for the support of multi-use trails in and around Lincoln and Lancaster County for jogging, biking, walking, and horseback riding, although we're not promoting that downtown Lincoln, unless there's an agreement there. We currently have a membership of over 800 citizens, and these members, along with members of the downtown business community, have donated over $250,000 to the N Street project. The primary reason for GPTN and member support of this project is that it will provide a safe east-west connection, as shown on the map, connecting across downtown Lincoln. We see this project as critically important to ensure that bicycle commuters can ride safely to their workplaces downtown, and the business community has responded in financial support of this project. Recreational riders, too, see this as the only safe way to access the redeveloped Haymarket area downtown from one of the most popular trails in Lincoln. And the cycling community of Lincoln has come in support. Organizations like the Great Plains Bicycle Club have provided generous donation to the project. The trail usage continues to grow in Lincoln. As you may have seen, we documented over 100,000 trail users on the Billy Wolf Trail alone this summer in 3 months. GPTN sees this project as an important addition to the 130 miles of trail that connect our community. As recipients of the American Planning Association Great Places Award this summer, we understand that our trail networks help define Lincoln as a fabulous place to live, work, and thrive. We thank you for voting in support of the use of the Aspen Development TIF funds for the N Street project. And I'd answer any questions if you have.
Questions?
Carl.
That number again, how many riders on the Billy Wolf Trail this summer?
We had over 100,000 trail users on the Billy Wolf Trail counted in 3 months.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? Come on forward.
My name is Gary Bentrup. I reside at 3936 Dudley Street. And I'm here on behalf of the Mayor's Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. And we too offer our support for this amendment. As Karen previously stated, the N Street Protected Bikeway is a valuable piece of transportation infrastructure for Lincoln. And just to leave you with a few statistics, Lincoln residents are ready for this project. According to the American Community Survey, a survey of commuting habits in the U.S. for 2013, Lincoln ranked 7th in the number of bike commuters in cities across the entire United States, of cities in the range of 200,000 to 300,000. Bike commuting in Lincoln has increased by over 140% from 2000 to 2012. And over the past 2 years, Lincoln has placed first and second in the National Bike Challenge for communities over 200,000 in population. This project is a great investment in the pedestrian bicycle infrastructure in the heart of Lincoln. In closing, the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee is pleased to support this amendment, and we are glad to see the City of Lincoln moving forward on this valuable project. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? Staff questions? Rebuttal? You can do it all day.
Rebuttal, yes. I'd like to rebut Director Landis because in answer to a very direct and clear question, he was unfamiliar with a sentence in this agreement. Tucked away in these 100 pages is this sentence: the redevelopment at its sole cost and expense shall maintain the streetscape improvements in order and state of repair so as to prevent deterioration thereof. We did make an agreement that they would be responsible for building them and paying the costs of them, but they also have the burden to maintain. And he was totally wrong and needs to eat his words. So that's what I want the record to reflect.
Any other
rebut that guy.
Any other questions? Dave, which one are we asking to be moved up? All of them?
No, 20.
Just the redevelopment agreement is the one that's necessary. That's the one that is the trigger for
Gotcha.
certainty, if you will.
No, I just said, no, just, I think when we get to the voting session, then if we have no objections here, we would make a motion to waive the rules and have action just on item 23.
Yes.
Okay.
Just on item what, 20?
23.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I asked that question because I thought it was something I hadn't seen before, the amount of investment in actually ongoing maintenance of streetscape improvements. So I'm glad that you
yes,
clarified the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. It was, anyway, that's what it says.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
All right, next is item 25, approving the First Amendment and restatement of conditional annexation and zoning agreement between Southwood Lutheran Church, Meridian Corporation, Sundance LLC, and the city to revise provisions regarding the timing for the design, grading, and construction of roads, water, and sanitary sewer infrastructure, and the responsibility for funding such costs on property generally located at South 40th and Rokeby Road.
Good evening. My name's Kent Seacrest, tonight representing a group of 3 different property owners: Southwood Lutheran Church, Meridian Corporation, and Sundance LLC. This is an area which has already been annexed from South 40th to South 48th and on both sides of Rokeby Road. So we're at the other side of the city, but still on Rokeby Road here. This area, again, was annexed before the Great Recession. It had a formal annexation agreement, and we're here to amend it tonight. A couple things. Number one, the old annexation agreement had some dates that both the city and the developer missed, and because the economy wasn't there to build infrastructure and to build homes. Number two, we talked about in the original annexation agreement, the developer building and loaning the city infrastructure dollars. Your recently approved capital improvement budget allows that not to happen, so the city is able to construct the infrastructure dollars, the infrastructure themselves. It also talks about phases of how many homes before certain road segments get built. And equally important, it talks about the need to show the trail connection that wasn't shown the first time around. And so we now have an agreement that allows both the city and ourselves to go forward and get this area built and for new homes. And I'd be glad to answer any questions. Again, I want to thank Planning Department, Public Works, and Law for helping us get this amendment done.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody who'd like to speak to this item? Staff questions?
I have some staff questions for David, Gary. David, could you just briefly explain how this agreement, this amendment, provides some advantages to the city that we didn't enjoy in the previous form?
Sure. The process of getting to this point, it really dates back to the development of the CIP that was amended as part of the capital budget with the budget process this past year. A big part of that effort was to do some outreach to the development community to try to find out what areas of the city that perhaps didn't have funding for infrastructure in place at this time going forward. And this was one of those that came through the process that made a good argument that they had now coming out of the Great Recession, they were ready for development to occur. part of the agreement going forward here is to have the funding available in the next 2 years, which is the actual capital budget, to do the water and sewer improvements. And that was what was agreed to and worked out as part of that process. Also within this updated agreement, it establishes a different level of understanding for how the payments will be made for those improvements, allows for some language to be cleared up that puts the city's position at more advantageous position, so that we're actually just paying for the projects that are needed at this time to get the development to move forward. So that's effectively where we are at with this proposal, and we're really happy to be at this point as well.
So originally we thought we might be paying interest as well, but now we're just going to move forward with actual dollars on hand.
Correct.
Thank you.
And been paying for it now and getting the projects in the ground.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
All right, next is our public hearing resolutions. Item 26, Comp Plan Conformance 14022, approving an amendment to the Antelope Valley redevelopment plan to add the 23rd and O Street project to rehabilitate and expand an existing retail building for a health clinic on approximately 2 acres of property generally located at 2301 O Street and the adjacent rights-of-way.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director. The Office Max location at 23rd and O is the area that we would like to describe in sufficient clarity that there would be the legal grounds to do a redevelopment agreement with the owners, and that is in the offing. We are drafting that now. We've been to the Planning Commission. They find conformance with the downtown plan in a number of different forms. What we're asking you to do is to make an amendment to our existing plan that would describe essentially in general terms this proposal. This is the current area. As you can see, it is a lagoon of not particularly well-maintained parking lot and an older structure. It is oddly placed in Lincoln because there is a box culvert that this building is over. Now that's a very unusual circumstance. We don't build on the top of utilities. It's really tough to repair utilities that have buildings on top of them, but we have one. And that makes this a unique structure. We will certainly have downtown design standards that apply, and that will be true for the parking lot as well. There will be trees that we now anticipate, and that this structure will be replaced something like this. We're not bringing you the redevelopment agreement with the commitments for what the restructuring of the building will be, but these are the current designs for what the building is intended to be, and it includes, as I said, grass and trees in front of the building. The project itself is about $5.3 million that we're proceeding on. It's a 23,000 square foot building now. There may be a 7,000 to 8,000 foot addition on the east side of the current building. And as I said, it will include landscaping. The Planning Commission approved. The Urban Design gave preliminary approval, but we will go back because we have to show them the design once again. That'll be done in January or February. Both of those groups did say that the back end of the project, the N Street side, is a pretty barren wall, if you will, and it's abutting across the street the Elliott School, and is there something there that can be done? One of the difficulties is the building is at the property line, so we don't have space to plant trees or bushes on the property itself. There is an area of the building that might be coming down. It's possible. And that would give us some more canvas, if you will, to work on the N Street side. One of the loading docks may be removed, and if that occurs, there would be some space for landscaping. We have talked about the possibility of a mural that uses some of the Elliott School kids as a part of it. But again, without commitment. This isn't the redevelopment agreement. This is simply saying this is a change in downtown Lincoln that we'd like to put into the plan so we can pursue it.
if we're barking up the wrong tree, and if this is a mistake or it's a direction that the council does not endorse because it does not represent community redevelopment, this would be a good time to tell us. Otherwise, we will go to work at trying to draft that agreement. The developer is here, as well as their legal counsel, and I'm sure you can ask questions of them as well.
Questions? Anybody like to speak to this item?
And we will bring this in the regular order of events. For sure.
Dave? We had that calendar out a year in advance.
Gotcha.
So,
and
don't
I'll
poke the
read
bear
this coming
while
calendar.
the bear is here, okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, I'm Mark Hunziker, appearing on behalf of the owner of the property. Thank you for your indulgence the last couple of weeks. We do now have a lease that is executed for the building, and we are ready to go forward with this plan. We expect to be back to you, as Dave said, in regular order to have a redevelopment agreement in front of you probably by February.
Okay, very well. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody who'd like to speak to this item? Staff questions? Next item, please.
All right, I'll call item 20, approving an amendment to the annexation agreement between the city and Country Meadows Homeowners Association regarding the reconstruction of roadways within the Country Meadows subdivision.
Members of the council, Roger Feigert representing Public Works and Utilities. I'll be very brief. I know there's a number of other folks. We've been working and trying to find a way to reconstruct the local streets in Country Meadows for nearly 4.5 years. About a year ago, we brought to this body, we thought, which was a paving assessment district. The council sent us away asking for 3 significant reconsiderations and some action on our part. First part was to reduce the overall scope and size of the project, and thereby also reducing the size and the cost of the project. You ask us to try to find a way to reduce the amount of city subsidy that would go into helping to reconstruct those streets. And you ask for a fair and meaningful contribution from the homeowners and the association that were there. Tonight, I think this annexation amendment to the annexation agreement has done just exactly that. We went back out, and instead of asking for a full city designed normal design standard street, we brought forward a street that really reflects the character and the condition of the street that's out there, basically replacing the 22 foot of pavement that is there today. That reduced the cost from over $1.7 million down to, we've got a budget of about $1.4 million. It also preserves the character and the integrity of that neighborhood as it was built. You ask us to reduce the cost. In the original project brought forward, the city estimate, or the city subsidy was estimated to probably be more than $1 million to $1.1 million. This agreement estimates the city subsidy at $800,000 cost. The Homeowners Association has agreed to a contribution of $600,000 to help the city get these streets reconstructed, over 40% of the total budget at this point. That would be paid back in 10 equal installments over 10 years. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions now or after others testify.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Anybody would like to speak to this item?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Tom Houston, 233 South 13th Suite, 1900 here in Lincoln, appearing before you today on behalf of the Country Meadows Homeowners Association. With me is Steve Clymer, the president. I also see Steve Lavel, who's the treasurer of the association, in the room, and Audra Kelly, who's the secretary of the association, also in the room. I also want to mention Kent Jex and Kendall Johnson, who are vice presidents of the association, because they should get all the credit. They've been working on this problem for 4.5 years. I'm kind of new to the party. I was engaged in May or so to help try to deal with the amendment to the annexation agreement, but the volunteers that serve on the board of directors of the association deserve all the credit. Just a couple things that I want to mention. There's one thing that everyone agrees in the neighborhood, that the streets are in bad repair, they're crumbling, we need to deal with the issue and have them reconstructed. just a little bit of history. If the development was originally constructed and developed in the mid-1980s, it operated as part of the county, not within the city limits, for approximately 10 years. Then in the mid-1990s, with some problems with the community sanitary sewer system, not part of the city system, the neighborhood really needed to be annexed to work with the city to provide sanitary sewer and water to the community. And that was done. The annexation agreement back in 1995 specifically describes the fact that reconstruction of the streets was not a condition for annexation, and that at some point the city could require the streets to be reconstructed in accordance with the existing design standards, and that the association members could be subjected to a special assessment to pay for that. Obviously, there is an agenda item on your agenda today, item number 46, that was rejected a year ago into November. That's been on the pending agenda, really in purgatory for the last 12 months because of the fact that the special assessment district was not to be the highest priority. Just a couple things in addition. I wanted to mention that the neighborhood efforts that we went through, when I was engaged, we wanted to make sure that we had a full and factual disclosure to all the members of the association. We prepared a fact sheet, we prepared a ballot. We had a neighborhood meeting at the Trinity Lutheran Church in Village Gardens. There are 60 lots within the subdivision. We had 54 homes present and accounted for either in person or by proxy. The question was posed to all the association members of really the proposal that's in front of you, a 22-inch or 22-foot wide concrete slab with 6 inches of depth, no curb and gutter, no sidewalks, no street lights, really replacing the existing improvements. And of the 54 persons that were present in voting, 47 or 87%, excess 87% voted yes, 6 voted no, and 1 abstained. 6 people did not show up and vote, but the 87% we took as a strong message from the association that they supported the efforts of the officers of the association to try to resolve this issue. Now, obviously, it is a compromise, as all compromises are. It's not perfect, but we think it balances all the concerns of all involved. Certainly, there's not a resident within Country Meadows that gladly is paying $10,000 to repair the streets, but they also recognize they want to get the streets repaired. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody who'd like to speak to this item, please come forward. Okay. Staff questions? You're coming. You're coming. Okay. Anybody who'd like to speak to this item, why don't you come down front, so we know that you're coming.
Good evening, City Council and citizens of Lincoln. I'm Ken Kira, and I'm a 20-year resident of Country Meadows, and this is my street. But of course, it's not my street alone. It's also your street, and your street, and your street, and all of your streets. I say that because a street belongs to the public. It's a public street. I agree with my Country Meadows neighbors that these public streets obviously need replacing. But I disagree that Country Meadow residents should share the cost of replacing them. Here's why. I have 6 reasons. First, private citizens should not have to share funding on public projects just because the projects are in their neck of the woods. What's next? Are we going to require Yankee Hill neighborhood residents to fund bridge replacements in Wilderness Park, or the downtown neighborhood to fund new development, new bike paths downtown? There are no real precedents for such shared funding, and it shouldn't start now. Second, we've already shared these costs. In the nearly 20 years since annexation, 60 Country Meadows residents have paid the city more than $6 million in property and wheel taxes. Third, precious little of that tax money was spent on Country Meadows streets because the city simply did not fulfill its obligation to maintain the streets. I have a file of road complaints the city disregarded, and I have photos documenting dangerous street conditions, long periods of no repair and inadequate repair, many, many other slabs like this that have washed ashore on my lawn. And as one council member told me, the city breached its obligation to maintain these country meadow streets. Fourth, the proposed road reconstruction plan is not in line with the 1995 annexation agreement, which states that such reconstruction shall be in accordance with then existing City of Lincoln standard specifications for street construction. Those specifications call for a wider road than proposed and for curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and streetlights, all of which are absent from the plan. Your plan replaces substandard streets with substandard streets and contains none of the required safety features like streetlights and sidewalks that other Lincoln citizens benefit from. Fifth, the agreement before us today is not a true agreement. As one city council member told me, it's kind of a shakedown. After letting Country Meadow streets go to pieces, the city told homeowners that they alone must pay for the street replacement at a cost of $31,000 per homeowner, and that the planned replacement would still not meet city standards. So naturally, when a cost-sharing agreement and lower payout eventually surfaced, coerced neighbors reluctantly agreed. Last, the proposed agreement is discriminatory. The council is asking Country Meadow residents to enter into a cost-sharing agreement that simply would not fly in other parts of the city, where incomes are lower. One council member said that city officials have often remarked that these are a bunch of rich people, they should take care of this. I disagree, and am prepared to fight this in court if need be. These are public streets, long ignored by the city and allowed to deteriorate. The city alone should take responsibility for this. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
I'll take my road with me.
Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item, please come forward. Rebuttal?
Actually,
we
for
need
rebuttal,
staff.
could we have a staff question from Mr. Feig?
Usually goes after, but
Well,
that's okay.
actually, well, usually staff would be before rebuttal.
Staff question.
Well, regarding this issue of standards, this road, when it was put in, was built in a very substandard way. That is, it had a very poor base. It disintegrated over time. Do you say so?
I would say so.
And it was, so the developer who put this road in originally, when it was in the county, built it to this substandard, not likely to last way. What? Quality. Thank you. Quality, yes, or lack thereof. Would you agree?
Not being there at the time that it was built, but if you look at the thickness of the pavement and the condition that's there today, it does not appear that it was built to even then the county standards at that point in time.
All right. Because I think that's an important thing here. When neighborhoods are built, it's normally the developer who builds a neighborhood who builds the streets that serve the lots within that development. And those streets then meet the city standard when they're built.
Yes.
And street lights are put in, street trees, sidewalks, the whole works. They're put in at that time.
Yes.
And the cost of all of that then goes into the lots.
Yes.
So every homeowner there is essentially assessed through the lot price for all of those improvements to build it to that standard.
Yes.
Okay. These lots didn't have that price figured in because this road wasn't built to that standard. It was built just as a very thin asphalt road, and none of those other improvements were put in because, well, it was a county-like environment. It's a rural-like environment.
Yes.
And we have an example of a neighborhood, Wilderness Ridge, where the developer specifically asked for us to allow them to build to different standards in city, lower standards, not put in streetlights, not put in curbs, et cetera. And because they wanted this rural environment. And I understand there are people who like to live in a different type environment. But because they did that, part of that deal was that those are private streets. We don't maintain them. We don't even go out there with snowplows, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So this idea that if a neighborhood, when it develops, if it doesn't develop to that standard, somehow we come back in later and put in all those improvements without assessing property owners, that's not really accurate.
No, in fact, in the older parts of town and other areas with unpaved streets, local streets today, an assessment district can be created and those costs are assessed. The same way sidewalks can be ordered in, those costs are assessed against the public, the private property. Same way with streetlights, we have lots of those locations where they're added later and the individual property owners do pay for those as they go in later on.
Right. Okay. Just wanted that to be clear. Thank you very much.
Maybe just one other clarification, as you talked about substandard streets. Clearly, our standards call for a 27-foot wide street with curb and gutter, but clearly it's within the purview of the Director of Public Works to agree to or recommend a waiver to those standards. The pavement itself is not going to be substandard. It's not going to be the same as our normal width and curb and gutter, but it will, within this agreement, it is stated that the Director of Public Works is granting that waiver, proposing that waiver for your consideration.
And we had that discussion. You did not want to reduce the thickness of the pavement or anything else because you wanted to make sure this would last.
Yeah, that is correct.
Thank you.
Trent.
On that note of how long this would last, how long does it last?
City paving?
Yeah, well, no, like what we're putting down.
We're proposing to here, our typical residential streets will easily last 35 to 40 years, and that's our goal with this as well.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that we need to do routine maintenance and take care of it as we go through. Sure.
Of course.
You want to follow up on his comment?
It was just a comment regarding the 35, 40 years. Because this modifies the annexation agreement, once this is done, it's now the city's responsibility, just as it is everywhere else. Once the street is put into that standard that we feel is appropriate, after that, 35, 40 years from now, we will, if necessary, replace the street then. The homeowners will not have a future responsibility for that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You might have to jog my memory, but as I recall, there were also some concerns about some of the implications of bringing the city up to full standards for the city out here because of the placement of mailboxes and other issues. Wasn't there some preference by at least some homeowners that we didn't make some of those changes that the curbs and the sidewalks would bring about?
Our sense over the last 4.5 years is that they wanted the more rural character maintained and kept. And I think that played a big role with your encouragement a year ago to try to scale the project down to the narrow roadway, maintaining the ditches, the landscaping that is there, preserving and being able to allow the mailboxes for most of them to stay. Yes.
Thank you.
Roger, the illusion that somehow this is a South Lincoln problem. Isn't it fact, though, that if you have substandard streets, regardless of where you are in town, and you've not paid for them once, and they've been improved, that you have to make a paving district, and 51% of the frontage is what's needed to go forward, and then that assessment is made in the same way with the homeowner pays so much per lot as assessed. So this is not really radically different than what we do in other areas of town.
That is correct.
And in this case, we have over 80%.
Right. And actually, in this case, by amending the annexation agreement rather than using an actual assessment district and determining benefit, we're actually in a position, and I do want to thank the Homeowner Association Board and the folks out there. They worked hard with us to try to get this solution. We're in a position to actually negotiate and actually increase the amount of contribution, I think, that was coming from the homeowners.
Okay. Thank you. Tom, do you want to rebut?
Thank you. I only wanted to mention one thing, and I would ask Teresa to put this with the minutes. Good. What I handed out is I tried to do a little bit of research on the precise question of whether or not members of owners of private property are ever really asked to pay for public contributions to public infrastructure. And I just did a survey of some of the situations where special assessment paving districts or repaving districts have been created over the last 13 years or so. And based upon what I was able to find, and there was not a precise circumstance in the city of Lincoln that was identical to here, where we're actually not creating an assessment district, but actually having an association make a contribution on an annual basis to defray that cost. But the fact remains that the city of Lincoln routinely, over the last 13 years, does specially assess some of the costs, just as you mentioned, Mr. Emery, to the benefited property. Based on what I could find, there was a range of, on the low end, a 35% contribution. If you're determining a ratio of the amount of special assessment to the total project cost, there's 35% on the low end, so the city's paying really 65% of the cost. The other extreme was a 78% on the high end, where the city's only paying 22% of the cost. On average, in my estimation, most of the city contribution was, or the private contribution was in the 40 to 50% range. In the circumstance in front of you, the request in front of you is a 43% contribution by the members of the association. So I think it is consistent with past practice, and I think it's consistent with other assessment districts that have been created, even though this is an analogous, it's not directly identical to the creation of a special assessment district. So that's what I wanted to clarify.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next is item 28, approving a contract between the city and Continuum Employee Assistance Training Consulting for employee assistance program services for a 3-year period from January 1st, 2015 through December 31st, 2017.
Good evening, Council. Doug McDaniel, Human Resources. This contract went under a bid process with purchasing. I have staff people here to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Anybody who'd like to discuss this item? Next item, please.
All right, next would be item 29, approving an agreement between the city and Western Pathology Consultants for drug and alcohol testing services for the period of January 1st, 2015 through December 31st, 2017.
Doug McDaniel, Human Resources. This contract underwent bid specifications with assistance from purchasing. This handles all the drug and alcohol testing for our DOT drivers, etc. I ask staff people here if you have any questions regarding this.
Questions? Anybody would like to speak to this item? Next item, please.
All right, item 30 is approving Holt Enterprises, LLC, doing business as Paul's Pub, as a Keno satellite site at 5250 Cornhusker Highway.
Mr. President, members of the council, my name is Katrina Coffey. I'm Vice President of Marketing for Big Red Keno. We're located at 11248 John Galt Boulevard in Omaha, Nebraska. I have with me today the owner, Paul Holt, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
Yes,
Not
sir.
a question as much as a comment. You've been here 2 hours, and
I hope it's not snowing.
seems like maybe this part of our agenda fits better with the liquor licenses. So maybe in the future we might look at where we have these and not having these folks have to sit here for 2 hours while we do a lot of other things.
Well, I can't imagine what they would have done that had been more exciting than this.
I've learned a lot.
I would say we did discuss a process some time back that would have allowed us to determine how much time we think certain items would take and possibly move those forward. We did do that on the simplest ones. Right. That's how the consent agenda up front occurred. But the rest has not been implemented yet, but may in someday.
Just
seem to fit.
With all due respect, comments are good, but this is probably not the forum we want to have this discussion.
All right.
Okay. I appreciate you taking over, and good luck out there. That's in my neighborhood, so I appreciate it. Any other questions? Thank you. Anybody who'd like to speak to this item? Staff questions? Next item, please.
Thank you.
I'll call item 31, accepting the report of new and pending claims against the city and approving disposition of claims set forth for the period of November 1st through the 30th, 2014.
Anybody who'd like to speak to this item? Staff questions. Next item, please.
All right, I'll call item 32, a resolution to establish the mayor's base salary of $83,000 for 2015-16 and thereafter to adjust the base salary by the CPIU for each succeeding year.
Doug McDaniel, Human Resources. This resolution changing the position's salary comes about as a result of the change in the retirement benefit for the position itself. By history, in December of 2002, Resolution 81848 was passed, setting the mayor's salary at $74,909 and a 12% contribution to retirement. Then in March of 2011, Resolution 86278 was passed, changed that retirement to 6% contribution by the mayor and a 6% match by the city. This change becomes effective with the term beginning in May of 2015. So the resolution before you today increases the position's base salary. If the action is not taken, the position will actually see a decrease in direct compensation due to the required 6% retirement match. So the resolution increases the base salary to $83,000 so that direct compensation is not negatively impacted. I reviewed regional cities with the mayoral form of government. I have found that a base salary of $83,000 is still near the bottom of the array. The average mayoral base pay out of 5 cities that I looked at is $109,485. So grossing up a position or increasing the base salary when there's been a significant change in the benefit is not uncommon. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Doug, there's a just for the employee, or just for the watchers benefit, there is only a certain time every 4-year quadrennial that this can be done, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. It has to be done before the...
And at the end of the day, this really was done because had we not done it, or if we go ahead and do it, if we don't do it, the mayor would be a net loser in terms of compensation.
That position would be, yes.
Correct.
Yes,
Correct.
that position would be.
Correct.
Downtown City Law Department, in response to your question, Councilman Emery, the city charter requires that this action must be taken prior to January 1st of the year in which the upcoming term will begin. There is a mayoral election as well as district council elections coming up in the spring of 2015. So any action to amend the salary of the incoming mayor would have to be undertaken prior to January 1st. Mr. McDaniel alluded to a couple of earlier resolutions, namely in 2002. Those were always also considered in December of the previous year. The issue with regard to the change in the salary and the retirement, yeah, I mean, actually the net would be that there would be a loss because of the new contribution. Right. So.
Okay. Well, I just think it's important for people to understand
Correct.
there's only
Why
a certain
now.
time you can do it.
Exactly.
And secondarily, this was not to jump the mayoral salary for whoever the mayor is. No. It was merely an opportunity to try to figure out how to make sure that it didn't take a cut.
That's correct.
Well, there's a constitutional provision that says that you cannot adjust the salary of an elected official once they're in office. So
Right.
it has to be done prior to the beginning of the term.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? Next item, please.
All right, I'll call item 33, assessing the costs incurred for cutting, clearing, and removing weeds against the various benefited properties for the period of January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2014.
Good evening, Chairman Emery, members of the City Council, Brent Meyer, Weed Superintendent for the Lincoln Lancaster County Weed Department. This is our annual resolution that I come before each year. These are the unpaid assessments from properties that we did cuttings on this year. I think on the attachments you had, there was 173 submitted on 11/4. Since that time, the ones that have been stricken out have been paid. So as of December 3rd, we've got 147 properties that I would ask you to assess against the properties.
Questions? Brent, I appreciate you doing this. It's always a long process from March to now. So I appreciate it. And nobody's happy, usually. And I sent you a constituent, and I appreciate you working with the elderly lady. Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? Next item, please.
Next is item 34, approving a contract agreement between the city and Gillig Corporation for the annual supply of transit bus transmission rebuild for StarTran for a 2-year term with the option to renew for 1 additional 2-year term.
Good evening, Council. Bob Walla, Assistant Purchasing Agent. And this is a multi-year contract for StarTran. I'm here for your approval, and I can answer any questions.
Any questions?
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else who'd like to speak to this item? Well, we can move into the voting session, but our chair's not here, so.
Or do you want to take a 5-minute break?
That'd be good.
Can we?
It would be good?
Yeah, let's do 5 minutes. Come back in 5 minutes.
Okay. There we go. Now we're good.
Public hearing ordinances second reading are items 13 through 25. Did someone want to make a motion on item 23?
Yes, I guess. Okay, I'll move that we waive the rules to act today on item 23.
Second.
Seconded by Trent.
And I've already had some discussion of this. Clearly, this was on our agenda early enough. Someone could have made a request a week ago, but it's also possible, knowing that there might be delays on working this out with the mayor's office, that the ordinance that is the thing that actually takes longer could have perhaps been scheduled anyway. There were a number of things that could have been done to avoid the end-of-year crisis. But since they weren't, and since we're facing this today, and since I think it's a good project, and since the attorney for the developer did reach out to all of my colleagues to ask them if they had any concerns or questions.
And since we did not hear any opposition.
Yes, and since we did not hear opposition today, I feel like if this is really important for the developer in order to move forward on this important project, that I'm willing to go along with it.
Any other questions?
Doug, I would just also add that that 3 times they went to the Urban Design Committee, and so that was a little delay in getting to us as well. So appreciate their diligence in getting to it.
My dissatisfaction has nothing to do with the project, and I think it is a worthy project. We are consistently bombarded with people, however, who believe there's some sort of netherworld that things get worked in behind the scenes, and there's a process, and so I'm fairly adamant we ought to stay with the process. I understand it. I'm willing to make an exception. We put a schedule out a year in advance so people kind of know that we're up against the wire here. So, okay, call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. All right, item 26 then.
Oh, wait, you now need to read that into the record and have somebody move the item itself.
I'm sorry, yes, I do. It was introduced by Eskridge.
So move.
Second.
Discussion?
And do you want to read the item into the record, or was that done? I don't.
This is approving the Aspen Heights redevelopment project redevelopment agreement between Breckenridge Group, Lincoln, Nebraska, LLC, and the city relating to the redevelopment of property generally bounded by Q Street, O Street, 17th Street and Antelope Valley Parkway. And it was introduced by Eskridge.
Yes. Second? It was second. So call roll, please.
Who seconded?
Trent.
Well, do we want to say anything about?
It seems like you didn't want to.
Oh, I just think it is I agree. This is a really impressive project. It's a very big project, and further shows the development opportunities in Antelope Valley and what, as was alluded to, but we can say more explicitly, what the Antelope Valley project allowed by taking properties out of the floodplain. We have created a huge amount of land there that's developable, and we now see the benefits from that. I'm really pleased to see this kind of project coming forward and this kind of investment being made, and I'm happy to support this.
I am as well. This really helps to solidify some of the East Downtown area that needs this boost. So that's tremendous. And I guess my only concern would be the talk about P Street sounds like a sequel. So, but no, actually, C Street's a good improvement. We look forward to continuing that work as we move east.
Larry.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that this is just a great example of how investments in blighted areas can really produce a domino effect that transform our city for the better, along with the Surety project, the RAP project, and now this one. This project in particular is making substantial public improvements, from the reconstructed on-street parking to streetscape improvements like the new sidewalks and irrigation and landscaping, to energy efficiency enhancements, and significant contribution to the N Street bikeway. So I intend to support this.
Any other comments? Thank you for coming and bringing this project here. I don't think anybody questions that this is a good thing for Lincoln. Call the roll, please.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. All right. Item 26 then is Comp Plan Conformance 14022, approving an amendment to the Antelope Valley Redevelopment Plan to add the 23rd and O Street project, introduced by Christensen.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Carl. Discussion? Discussion. Call the roll, please.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 27 is approving an amendment to the annexation agreement with Country Meadows Homeowners Association, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Jonathan.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank the neighbors who worked very hard on this agreement with our city staff and with Public Works. Really appreciate Public Works going back and working hard to make a project here that we could all support and be happy with, because I think it does maintain the rural character of the neighborhood, yet it still gets a street that will last for the long term. But another factor, it wasn't mentioned today, which is the timing of the doing of these streets, since we have a very limited supply of money for doing residential rehabilitation. And there are a lot of streets in town. If you look at the map, there's even a map online, you can look at the residential street ratings and you'll see that they are rated by color as to condition. There are a lot of red streets. They're in really bad shape. And we need more funds to do more of those really critical need residential streets. So when it came time to even talk about the timing of this, we had the main street through this neighborhood, which was in the worst shape, but we had a number of other streets as well that were in less bad shape. And one might have said, if we're going to rate these streets, we will do them in an order where we just do part of this neighborhood and we come back years later to do the rest. And I know from experience in some other projects where there's been just a couple blocks of a side street next to a street Public Works is doing, and they haven't included that in the project because they say that's not as high a priority. And even get that couple blocks included to say, while you're there, let's do that, has not been easy. So That's the discussion we always have about how much to include. In this case, the neighbors get all of the streets in the neighborhood constructed as part of this project. So their contribution and this change in design allows that to happen, and I think that's a real benefit. This is something we can do now, and then we won't have to be back in there with bulldozers and cement trucks again to disrupt the lives of the folks in this neighborhood. So I appreciate the contribution that's been put forward and the compromise that's been made. I think this is a good deal overall, and I'm pleased to see it before us.
Carl?
Thank you. You know, this issue is not unique to this particular neighborhood, and there are other neighborhoods, parts of our city that have also been annexed in. Havelock, West Lincoln, Belmont, College View, other communities that used to be separate communities now are part of Lincoln. And when those communities were brought in them were a number of substandard streets, many of them still unpaved streets. As it is now, if those individuals who live on those streets want to have their street paved, they have to pay for it. There has to be a paving district, and in many of those areas, there are landlords that that don't live, but they own property there. They're not interested in seeing their costs increase. Consequently, it's very, very difficult to get those streets paved. I'm pleased to see this for this neighborhood, and I think it's something that the city needs to consider. Hopefully find money to find ways to improve community streets throughout our city. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? I would just say, I know it's been a long haul, and a year ago when we were here, I know you thought we were never going to get this solved. And I appreciate patience on everybody's part. I appreciate all the work on Public Works to try to find something we could all live with. So with that, let's go forward. Call the roll, please.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook? Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 28 is the contract with Continuum.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure everybody in the development feels like that's a clapping material, but
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Item 28 is the contract with Continuum, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Roy. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 29 is the agreement with Western Pathology, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Just seconded by Roy. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook? Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 30 is the approving Paul's Pub as a Keno satellite site at 5250 Cornhusker Highway, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 31 is the report of claims for the period of November 1st through the 30th, 2014, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 32 is a resolution to establish the mayor's base salary at $83,000 for 2015-16 and thereafter to adjust the base salary by the CPIU for each succeeding year, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 33 is assessing the costs incurred for cutting, clearing, and removing weeds against the various benefited properties for the period of January 1st through December 31st, 2014, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook? Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 34 is the contract between the city and Gillig Corporation, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Roy. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 35, approving a real estate sales agreement between the city and Anderson Homes, introduced by Cook.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Trent. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 36, text amendment 14015, repealing section 2767075 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to parking in the Capital Environs District to allow the parking in the Capital Environs District to be determined by the underlying zoning district, introduced by Cook.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Trent. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 37, text amendment 14016, amending section 2762140 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the heavy commercial use services use group to allow mini warehouses as a conditional use in the B5 Planned Regional Business District, introduced by Cook.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Trent. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 38 is amending the chapter title of Lincoln Municipal Code, Chapter 228, as Human Resources Department, and amending sections 228010, 228020, and 228030 of the Lincoln Municipal Code to redesignate the Personnel Department as the Human Resources Department and the Personnel Director as the Human Resources Director, introduced by Cook.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Trent. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 39 is repealing Chapter 544 of the Lincoln Municipal Code, sidewalk, snow removal and cleaning businesses relating to permits for operating motor-powered snow removal or sidewalk cleaning equipment on sidewalks within the city, introduced by Cook.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Trent. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Emery,
Yes.
Eskridge. Motion carried 6-0. Reconsideration for a technical correction. Item 40 is adopting the LES annual budget for 2015 to become effective January 1st, 2015. This was originally introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Well,
Second.
well, actually, it's, someone has to move reconsideration, so
Yeah.
I'll move reconsideration of the resolution for the LES budget that we passed last week.
So
Second.
moved.
Second by Trent.
There you go.
Okay, and then if this passes, then it'll be on the floor, and then we'll discuss what to do next. Okay. And,
Call a roll, please.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Just a brief, Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney, brief explanation about why this is possible. I apologize for making this long night a little bit longer. When LES sent over their budget resolution with this ordinance, I said, well, just send it over as one package and we'll vote on it. Fortunately, they needed a separate ordinance number, and that's why we've asked you to reconsider it and break it into two different ordinance in the resolution. So if you could make a motion, we've got a written amendment to divide the question.
Okay, I'll move motion to amend number one, which would divide the question on the floor into two parts. One, the resolution that approves the budget, the other, the ordinance for the financing part.
Second by Roy. Discussion. Let's just make this very clear. This does not change anything in the cost or the rates or anything that we did last week. This is merely a technical change here.
Right, you're just dividing the resolution that you.
Which we should have done and we neglected to, so we're straightening that error up.
Yes.
All right. Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Jeff, should Jonathan sign the new resolution then?
Well,
Resolution.
Yeah, which one?
if you want a signature on it, I guess what will happen is we'll end up with two motions and we'll take them in order. One, after this motion passes, one would be the resolution. If we need to amend it, we'll do that.
Yes.
The other, the ordinance. If you want me to sign both, I'll sign both.
So we have three votes. The
Mhm.
motion to divide the question and then
Right.
the
And then the
two
motion on
dividing
the
question.
resolution.
And the ordinance.
And then separately, the motion on the ordinance. But those are both already on the floor, so we don't need to reintroduce them. We
Well,
just
motion to
take them
amend
in
is
order.
to divide the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I can sign your pieces of legislation as well.
So last week, we should have had an ordinance vote and a budget resolution vote,
Yes.
but we did not do that.
Clarify, you did have it
Right.
long enough for the ordinance to
Yeah,
have come
yeah.
before you.
Just didn't have a number on
Yeah.
it, so that made it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, discussion, call a roll.
And seconded the motion to amend.
Trent.
Trent?
Thank you. Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook? Emery?
Yes?
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
Who's on first?
Okay.
Jonathan?
What's before us now is the resolution, but the resolution, the piece I saw online had the resolution laid out in it. So what I just introduced here would include a version of the resolution that included a paragraph that you want to remove.
Right. The original resolution referred to the ordinance as part of the resolution because it was one package. So there's amended resolution that I've asked.
So this, we probably should, I guess,
This resolution doesn't include a reference to the ordinance.
right. But this one isn't what's on the floor, so I should probably move this as, I'll move that we replace the resolution with this amended resolution that is a correction.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion,
Thank God you're here.
call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
And now we vote on the resolution that we just, the amended resolution.
Anybody want to discuss that? Call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook? Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
Now the ordinance is on the
Ordinance.
floor. If you want me to sign it, but otherwise.
Well, I would, but there's no signature.
There's no signature spot?
No, because it's already out.
Okay, then that's fine too.
Discussion, call a roll.
All right, so Cook moved the ordinance, and who seconded?
Well, we didn't need to because it was part of the
Part of the
the
recall.
division of the question. And since the division of the question put them both out there, we took care of part one. Now we're taking care of part two. It's already on the floor.
Okay. We'll chat tomorrow, Jeff.
Call the roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
Done.
Is that it now, Jeff? Are we okay?
We're good.
Okay. All right. Ordinances first reading are items 41 through 43. Resolutions on first reading are items 44 and 45. And our pending list are items 46 through 50.
I'd move that we remove item 46 from the pending list.
Second.
By Larian. Discussion. Well, this was part of the earlier process this evening in Country Meadows, so this just gets it off the books.
You mean you want to withdraw it then?
Withdraw it, yes.
Very good.
Correct. And seconded by Larian. Call a roll, please.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Then, anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned to appear on a future agenda may do so at this time.
Mr. Chair, seeing none, I'd like to wish everyone in our city a happy New Year and a Merry Christmas and a move adjournment.
Second.
Seconded by Jonathan. Discussion. Call a roll.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried. 6-0.
We are returned.
Hallelujah.
Long night.